Look, manure's poison. You're literally killing your farm. Welcome back to American Beef Ranch. My name is Jesse. We're here on a 185-acre certified organic farm in south central Idaho. And at the same time, we also offer some fertilizer and soil fertility and conditioner products because we've learned a lot about dirt and the wrong way to do it. Now, very common in this part of the world and pretty much any other part of the world, feedlots and dairies have a lot of manure they have to get rid of. And a lot of farmers go ahead and they use that manure or compost, if it's been composted, and they spread it on their fields. And what they hope to get out of it is some fertilistic value, and they hope that it helps improve their soil. And for a long time, that was true. From the knowledge that we knew for a long time, that is exactly what happened. But today I'm here to tell you that manure is poisoning your farm. Pretty much all manure is going to poison your farm, and it's going to piss some people off, and that's okay. It's meant to ruffle feathers. It's meant to get you to think. We've been doing the same things over and over for a lot of years, and guess what? Eventually something comes across that's better. And today I want to show you why manure is bad. So, after doing a lot of research and doing a lot of thinking and a lot of soil testing and a lot of other testing, we have found that there's a few things that always apply. You know, some minerals that have to be in place and some other things. I was pulling soil samples for a couple farmers in the area that I work with. Now those farmers, we started to look at their carbon to nitrogen ratios because we know that biology love a good carbon to nitrogen ratio. They want at least 15:1. Well, these soil samples I was pulling, we are seeing anywhere from 15 to 30:1, which is awesome, which is great. But I've had this sneaking suspicion in the back of my head about manure and applying it, because these guys are applying a ton of either raw manure or compost per acre every year all the time. They're spending upwards of $300 an acre to apply compost, and in my head, in the back of my mind, I've always felt that taking manure out of a pit or a dairy and putting it on the farm when it's got a bunch of extra stuff that not necessarily helps biology, it actually hurts biology, doesn't make any sense, and I've always felt that way. So then I had a phone call last week with a bald guy from South Dakota, and we both indirectly had the same thought process about manure, but he had a grower at one point that was doing so, and he actually went away from it, went away from putting manure on his farm, because what they found is that manure is always contaminated. Always. It's contaminated with glyphosate, it's contaminated with antibiotics, it's contaminated with GMOs. And those contaminants go into the soil, and then guess what? Who has to deal with it? The soil biology. And the soil biology will deal with those problems, but you've got to let them deal with it. And the problem is, if you stack manure on those fields every year over and over and over again, guess what? Biology can never ever get ahead and actually build your soil to be healthy. It may start to look healthy on paper, you may get your micro and your macronutrients correct, but building soil structure, building carbon to nitrogen ratios, letting the biology thrive is never going to happen if you continue to put glyphosate on your fields, antibiotics to your animals, and using GMOs or coated seeds. It just won't happen. Now listen, I am not trying to belittle anybody. You are literally doing the best you can with the knowledge you have. Another problem that people don't talk about is that manure is a pretty piss poor fertilizer. And in the grand scheme of things, really all you're adding is matter and carbon, which is greatly important, but you're not getting any fertilizer value out of it. And if you want to know why, because when you look at fertilizer and you look at compost and you look at manure, usually most people are looking at the nitrogen content. They want to know how much nitrogen they're getting out of it. The problem is that the nitrogen that a plant needs is minuscule in compared to available calcium, available phosphorus, carbon, and oxygen. You know what animals do during digestion? What nutrients they pull out the most? Available calcium, available phosphorus, carbon, and oxygen. So guess what? The waste coming out the back end doesn't have those things. And guess what a plant wants the most? Available calcium, available phosphorus, carbon, and oxygen. So literally manure is pretty much worthless as fertilizer. Matter, carbon, absolutely. But, like we said again, if contaminated with glyphosate, comes from GMO feeds, if you're putting antibiotics at all all you're doing is taking all of that nasty crap, putting it in the fields, and then guess what? It's going into the fields and it goes into the watershed, and you know what? Eventually it is not going to work positively. Somebody still may get on here, well, I've put a whole bunch of compost and I've done a whole bunch of work, and guess what? It really has helped my fields. No, what you've done is you've got more value out of the tillage that you've used to incorporate that product into the field than you have out of the manure. Because guess what? Soil has to first and foremost breathe oxygen and nitrogen and carbon dioxide for the soil system to work. And guess what? When you do a little tillage, when you knife in some liquid manure, guess what? There's a little air gap there. Air can get down in the soil. Those microbes can breathe and they can work. And yeah, they're gonna have to work on that liquid manure and they're gonna have to break it down. But the air is what's actually helping your soil. Is there any way for manure to possibly be good for your farm? Well, absolutely. It is carbon and it is matter. So if you want carbon and matter, you just basically have to make sure that the source of that manure is good. So like an organic dairy that doesn't use any GMOs, any sprays, any of that negative stuff. And if they do have to treat an animal with an antibiotic, they take it out of the group and they don't put that manure in that compost. The problem is the organic dairy is probably going to hoard that stuff. If you're grazing cattle on your own land and you're not using antibiotics, you're not using any growth hormones, you're not spraying any glyphosate, just like this farm behind me, you have a distinct advantage above everybody else for soil health and soil improvement. There is no reason that this organic farm behind me that hasn't been sprayed in over 20 years or hasn't had any of that negative stuff, no antibiotics, none of that glyphosate, none of it, that this farm cannot completely outperform a regular conventional farm down the road that sprays every single year, sometimes multiple times a year. You just have to plan and put things in place. And guess what? You're gonna have a lot of manure. You got waste to deal with. So if you want to make the step, you're gonna have to eliminate GMO feeds, glyphosate, treated seeds, antibiotics from your system, from that manure, if you're gonna wanna be able to deal with that waste in a way that's positive for your farm and positive for the soil health of your fields. A lot to consider, but I know you can do it. I think the last point to really consider here is that the only thing that can break down and eliminate glyphosate contamination is microbiology is the only thing that can break down the glyphosate that we're using in our soil, and it's technically an antibiotic. So, like you said, if you continually feed this system with more and more glyphosate, basically you have microbiology sacrificing itself continually to clean up the nastiness that you've put into your fields with glyphosate and other products. So they're continuously sacrificing themselves to clean those products and never really working to build your soil. So you can make a decision. You can choose to eliminate that stuff slowly over time, figure out a way to eliminate that stuff and really help build your soil, or you can keep farming the same way and farm your soil into dust. And I want to leave you with this. 70 years ago, when nitrogen fertilizer first showed up on the market, everybody thought it was crazy. Everybody thought it was wacko. And guess what? Now, it's more common than almost any other kind of fertilizer in the world. And guess what? 70 years on, we're still doing things almost the same way. So, I would ask you, do you think in 70 years we've learned a little bit more about soil and a little bit more about the processes that go on and how to benefit the soil? Or are you just going to keep using the same old things that you've done and your dad's done and your grandpa did? It's time for you to change. It's time for you to push forward in your soil health journey. God bless. My name's Jesse. This is American Beef Ranch.